Welcome to our show. I'm here at Landon Sikahema, and as a guest for this week's episode, we have Vai Sikahema, my father. Thanks so much, Dad, for coming as a guest on the show.
Yeah, glad to be on.
So I'm going to talk with my dad right now. As many of you probably know, what he's most famous for is, his college career at BYU. At BYU, they were winning Holiday Bowls. They won a national championship game. He finished his NFL career with the Philadelphia Eagles. That was the one time actually of his 8-year NFL career where they made the playoffs. And then we finished his career in Philly with the Eagles, and he would be, famous sports broadcaster after that in Philadelphia. And so because of that, he's often associated with the Eagles. He's associated with BYU. He's associated after his NFL career for boxing, Jose Canseco. But what a lot of people don't know about you, Dad, is 5 of your 8 NFL seasons were with the Cardinals.
Yeah, I started with the Cardinals. The Cardinals drafted me when they were still in St. Louis. So Mom and I went there. You were 6 months old when we went there. And we spent 2 seasons there, and then the owner, Bill Bidwell, moved to Phoenix. We spent 3 more seasons in Phoenix. Then we went to the Green Bay Packers for 1 year. Contract expired. Eagles picked up my new contract. And we went there, and I played my last 2 years, and then we stayed there for 26 more years as I worked in broadcasting.
Yeah, so again, most people don't know that 5 of his 8 NFL seasons were with the Cardinals. It's less memorable in a lot of ways. They never made the playoffs. It wasn't as big in the media as, say, especially his first year with the Philadelphia Eagles. But there's a deceptively amount of interesting stuff that happened in your first 5 years in the NFL, all with the Cardinals. So I want to, interview you today about your time with the Arizona Cardinals. I want to start with the fact that, you're a rookie in 1986, and you weren't the only new addition to the Cardinals that year, right? The new head coach started the year that you were there, head coach Gene Stallings. And was he there for the draft? Did he draft you?
He did. They hired him right after the 85 season. The previous coach had gotten fired, and then they hired Coach Stallings. He was the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys for probably a dozen years. Was their defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach when they went to the Super Bowl in, I think, 76 or 77. And then he came to the Cardinals and drafted me. I was shocked that I was drafted because I didn't play that much at BYU, quite honestly. I think I started 2 games my whole BYU career, but I was a really good punt returner, and that's what they needed. Unbeknownst to me, the Cardinals were planning to trade their number 1 running back, a guy named Otis Anderson, and they ended up trading him later that year, my rookie year, to the New York Giants, where he became the MVP of the Super Bowl 90. And then they wanted to elevate Stump Mitchell, who had been the backup, to be the starting running back. And Stump had been their punt returner. And so they were looking for a new punt returner. And so that's why they drafted me. And it worked out perfectly because I had a really good year and had a great training camp. But Gene Stallings was the guy who called on draft night and said, "Son," he had a real deep Southern drawl, "proud as punch to tell you that you are now a St. Louis Cardinal." And I didn't know who he was, never heard him before, but we didn't have Google back in those days, so I could look up who he was. I didn't know anything until I got there, but it was really exciting, and we had a good year. I had a good year. The Cardinals didn't have we were like 5-11, but I had a really good year as a punt returner.
Yeah, so again, like you talked about, the Cardinals weren't that great. Your whole 5 years, I know you guys never made the playoffs, and so again, especially when people talk about your accolades and your career, your time with the Cardinals is often glossed over. But this head coach that drafted you, Gene Stallings, he actually was, he had a fairly significant storied background. And then, as you've told me, after he was with the Cardinals, again, the Cardinals weren't that great when he was there. He would continue to have a lot of notable success. But let's first talk about, aside from a head coach, just how much of a great mentor he was to you, just as a man and as someone you looked up to.
Yeah, Gene was a very Christian man. Grew up in Paris, Texas, as a boy on a farm, and he went and played football at Texas A&M in College Station, Texas, for the legendary Bear Bryant. And
Yeah, and again, a lot of people don't know that before he was famous as maybe the best college head coach ever at Alabama, Bear Bryant was the head coach at Texas A&M.
right, his head coach was Bear Bryant. And there's a famous story about Gene was one of, I think there were 27 guys that ended up surviving what was they went to a small town called Junction, Texas, 1954, and they're called the Junction Boys. I think it was ESPN made a movie of it. And basically they were the survivors. They're like, they took 100 guys to camp, and people walked out, left in the middle of the night, hitchhiked out at Junction, because I think it was 10 days of just brutality, their training camp. And Gene was one of the surviving boys, and they were venerated, and are still known today as the Junction Boys. Among them was Jack Pardee, who had been a head coach later with the Washington Redskins, was all pro with the Rams and the Redskins. Who's the other one? Raymond Berry, I think, was a part of that team.
Yeah, the famous Pro Bowl wide receiver Raymond Berry, who would eventually be the number one target at the Baltimore Colts for Johnny Unitas. For those of you who don't know, before Joe Montana came along, for decades, Johnny Unitas was considered the GOAT among quarterbacks, and his best receiver throughout his career was an eventual Hall of Famer named Raymond Berry, who, as you say, Dad, played on this team.
Landon is our family historian on all things NFL. He knows more stuff about the NFL than I do. But anyway, so Gene Stallings was a part of that team, and then would go on he actually replaced Bear Bryant at Texas A&M. And then after he got fired by the Cardinals after 4 years, after my fourth season, he was fired. Joe Bugle came from the Redskins, and took over the Cardinals, and Gene ended up hired by Alabama. This was all before Nick Saban, of course, and he won a national championship for them. He had followed Bear Bryant. There were one or two other coaches that had followed Bear Bryant, but he came in and was the first one to win a national championship at Alabama after Bear Bryant. And it was like 1992 or 93. Anyways, Gene was a really good man. One of the things I really appreciated about him is that on Sundays, even though we worked on Sundays at training camp, he posted on the bulletin board all the churches that were in the local area where we were in camp. It was a small town, Eastern Illinois, and Eastern Illinois University was the school. It was a small 3A school, or what do they call it? 3-tiered school. But it was in Charleston, Illinois. And anyways, he posted all the local churches, and he told us, "Men, I'm going to give you Sunday morning off so that you can go to church and get right with your Maker." That's the way he put it. "I want you to be right with your Maker. What we're about to do this season is any football season is a really hard thing to do, and you've got to be right with your Maker." He was always preaching about how we need to be right with our Maker. So he would give us the Sunday morning off, and he said, "I want you to go to church, go to your synagogue, go to your mosque, go pray, and God will help you. Now, you may not make the team, but he'll help you in other things in your life." That was really unique for me as an NFL player, because not many coaches talk like that, especially for a guy coming from BYU, where Lavelle Edwards was the head coach, and we were guided by the guiding principles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it was a really nice landing spot for me to end up in the NFL.
That's really awesome. Tell us about, like you said, in 1986, when you're a rookie, he was the brand new head coach of the St. Louis Cardinals. But the way that he had kind of come up successfully to get to be a head coach was throughout the 70s. Like you said, he was an assistant coach on the Dallas Cowboys under the legendary head coach Tom Landry. In the 70s, the Dallas Cowboys would go to 5 Super Bowls and win 2 of them. And he was there for the last 3 that they went to, and one that he won with them. But I always remember you telling me that, for those last 2 Super Bowls or so, they lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, obviously, in the 70s, between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys, there are these two titans. They mostly beat everybody else. And so when they met against each other in the Super Bowl twice within 4 years, it was just like a clash of the titans. And they were some of the most epic Super Bowls even to this day. But on both occasions, the Pittsburgh Steelers won. So even though the Dallas Cowboys were often seen as, one of the great teams of the 70s, they were always at least second best to the Steelers. And so given that he came from this background, tell me the story you've always told me where he used to tell you guys what he really thought about being under Tom Landry and why he felt like they always lost the Steelers.
Yeah, basically he felt that they were too gimmicky and that they weren't tough enough.
Too much of a finesse team.
He felt that the Cowboys of the 70s were a finesse team. And I guess this comes from the perspective of a defensive coach. But so was Landry. Landry was a defensive coach when he was with the Giants earlier in his career. And when he came to the Cowboys, he was a defense coach. But he felt that they were too finesse and that the reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers beat them and dominated them was because they were a punch-you-in-the-mouth kind of team. And they were. They had that offensive line with Mike Webster was their center, and they just, they had Rocky Bleier run at fullback, and Franco Harris was their running back, and they loved to run the football. Now, they had a Hall of Fame quarterback in Terry Bradshaw and 2 Hall of Fame receivers in Stallworth and who's the other guy?
Lynn Swann.
Lynn Swann, that's right. Hello. So they had, they had Hall of Famers, but in general, Gene thought that the Steelers were just a powerhouse team, and they loved to run the football. So he felt that's why they always succumbed to Cowboys.
Yeah. So do you feel like that's kind of how
Steelers.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's how he tried to run the Cardinals? Is he preferred you guys to be a little more smash mouth as opposed to finesse?
Yeah, he did. He wanted to be a smash mouth team, and we didn't have the personnel for that. In fact, the year before I got there and before Gene Stallings got there, they drafted Jay Novacek as a tight end, and I think it was Gene that ended up trading him to the Cowboys because Jay Novacek came from Wyoming. He was like a 215-pound tight end, and he was kind of a tweener. He was too big for a wide receiver, but too small for a tight end. But they didn't know what to do with him, so they traded him to the Cowboys. And, of course, Jay Novacek ended up being a great tight end for the Cowboys because they threw to him. That was his strength. Gene didn't have any use for tight ends who couldn't block.
So you feel like he was too much of a receiving tight end, or otherwise Gene would have kept him.
Exactly, yeah. Gene wanted a third tackle on that, on that side of the line of scrimmage right next to the left tackle or the right tackle. He wanted a tight end that could be a big guy that could just, smash people, and because he wanted a running game. And we had good backs. Stump Mitchell was a good running back, great running back, and the fullback was a guy named Earl Farrell from Eastern Tennessee. He was like 6'2", 260 pounds, but really soft hands, could run routes, and was a good blocker. So Gene wanted to create a team that was really in his image, and he eventually did that when he got to Alabama. He got to do what he wanted at Alabama, and had the time to. In the pros, they don't give you a lot of time to get you a pro. You got to start winning right now when they hire you. So
interesting. So speaking of Jay Novacek, again, what's interesting is a lot of people don't know much about your career on the Cardinals, but despite the fact that you guys never made the playoffs, you actually got to play with some pretty big time stars and guys who would eventually become big names later, like Jay Novacek. He would be the starting tight end for the Cowboys dynasty in the 90s, winning 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. Let's talk about some of your famous Cardinals teammates. Let's start with Jay Novacek.
Jay and I played against each other in college because we were in the then WAC, Western Athletic Conference, but he was drafted the year before I got there. And Jay was he was very quiet, a little bit shy, I'm not. I'm gregarious and make friends easily, and I'm always, high-fiving people, talking, backslapping. So one of the memories I have about Jay, one day I saw Jay in the training room, and he had a BYU T-shirt on, and I asked him, Jay, where'd you get your shirt? He said, oh, when we came and played you guys in Provo, they had a little travel kit for us in our locker, and there was a T-shirt, some soap. And he said there was a book that was in there. It was a Book of Mormon. He said I didn't do anything with the book, but I kept the T-shirt and I used the soap. So at training camp, they would make you stand up and sing, and they started with the first round draft pick. The first round draft pick would, they'd call out. It was a guy named Anthony Bell, who's a linebacker from Michigan State. He had to start every night by getting up, stand on his chair, get up. You had to announce your name, what round, and your school, and then you had to sing your fight song or something. Something. If you didn't know your fight song, you had to sing something. And so they would go down the list, and when they got to me, the first night we did this, I got up and stood on my table at my chair, and I said, "Hey, listen, Vai Sikahema, Brigham Young, 10th round, running back / punt returner. I'm going to tell you the truth. I really don't know my school fight song. It's called Rise and Shout, but I don't know it. But I'm going to tell you somebody in this room does know it. Jay Novacek, you heard my fight song about 10 times every year we played you guys, because they kept playing it over and over every time we scored. And the place went nuts. They were just howling, busting up. And I knew I was in right there. But they made Jay stand up and sing Rise and Shout, and he got up because the defensive guys were going, hey, get your butt up and start singing with Sikahema. So he like reluctantly got up, and he didn't know the words, but he just kind of followed me, and he never forgave me for that, but it was just in good fun. It was just kind of a fun thing. I kidded Jay, but Jay got to know my personality a little bit from that experience, and we just made us, better friends.
That's really awesome. Yeah, again, the great Jay Novacek. Most people probably don't even know he was with the Cardinals before his famous, career, being a big contributor to the Dallas Cowboys dynasty in the 90s. But yeah, with that interesting tradition they had with forcing the rookies to get up and, perform something. I know that the great Falaniko Noga, the linebacker that came before you, maybe just a year or two on the Cardinals, isn't there a famous story you used to tell me about when they wanted him to get up and, perform something a couple of years earlier?
He was the only guy that never got up to sing. Falaniko was a nose tackle at University of Hawaii and was an All-American.
Did you play against him at BYU?
Okay, yeah. We were the same age, actually. He came from Samoa. He was very, very, in fact, very quiet. But Falaniko was built like a Greek god. I mean, abs, arms, and he had a Fu Manchu mustache, goatee. His hair was completely buzzed. Well, he had a mohawk, sides were completely shaven, and he had in the back, he grew a rat tail. He woven his hair into a rat tail that went down, maybe halfway down his back. So just think about that. And he walked around with lava like the Samoans and some Tongans do, and had a tank top, lava, and slippers, flip-flops at training camp. But nobody, people kind of snickered because, we're in Illinois for training camp, and St. Louis, nobody knew, wow, this guy's walking around in a skirt, pinned to his side, but he was so menacing looking that nobody would ever say anything. And apparently his rookie year, previous year, with Novacek, he was the one guy that I heard had never sang, even though he was drafted. But he just refused the draft, and even the toughest guys on the team, they couldn't.
They tried to get him to,
they
right?
Tried to get
Isn't
him
there
to,
a story where,
yeah, but he said, "Let's go. You guys want? I'm not going to sing. You guys want to go? Let's go." So nobody wanted to take him on, and because they would have had their hands full with Falaniko Noga. Anyway, so that was Falaniko's story. He was a nice guy. He was a nice guy when you got to know him. But really, there's some, he didn't have a great career. He played 8 or 9 years after the Cardinals cut him. He went to Detroit and played another couple of years. But he was just one of those interesting characters. Anybody from my generation, especially Polynesian, remembers the name Falaniko Noga. He was he was famous in our era because he was such a great player. But I have to tell you the story about him, because anybody that's in my generation that remembers him for one simple story. Apparently, he got suspended from school for a semester
At UH.
Academically, and he had come from Samoa when he was 16 or 17, and he only played one year of high school in Farrington High School in Honolulu, and then he went to the University of Hawaii, but still, spoken broken English, that kind of thing, and apparently he was famously asked by a reporter about his GPA, his grade point average, and he famously, sadly, and for all time, would be remembered for his response, which was, "My father no drive that kind of car." He thought he meant GTO. My father no drive that kind of car.
He probably didn't realize just how much that said about how his GPA was doing to the reporter.
Right. That also reflected on his GPA. But that little soundbite made Falaniko famous for all time in Hawaii. Anybody of my generation that hears that name, they still quote that. My father no drive that kind of car. But I love Falaniko, and his wife Pofa was real close to us with your mother. They were close friends, and he's just the greatest guy. I played with some really interesting people, but you do in the NFL because there's so many interesting characters that come that break out from their universities and make it to the league. And if they make the team, I've always said this too, son, and I think you've heard this over the years in my life, that whenever I think that whenever you're gifted with something really special, like athletic talent, I think one way that God balances things out is that if you're gifted with one thing, you're really deficient in some other things. And like look at people that have musical talent, like anybody, Michael Jackson. I'm talking about people from my generation. They're kind of nuts. They're kind of crazy, right? Yep. They live a crazy life, but I think it's because they are so gifted in one area that they're really deficient in other areas. Whether it's social or other things that they're really different in. And I saw that a lot with a lot of my teammates who were athletically gifted, like world-class gifts, but they were goofy in a whole bunch of other areas, or not real smart, So at any rate.
Oh, that's awesome. Now we're going to talk, I'll probably ask you about one more player before we talk about the NFC East at large. So, you're 5 years in the NFL. 3 of those 5 years, a team from your division, the NFC East, would win the Super Bowl. Your rookie year, the Giants would win the Super Bowl. Your second year, the Redskins would win the Super Bowl. And then your fifth and last year with the Cardinals, the Giants would win the Super Bowl again. But your second year in the NFL, the Redskins win the Super Bowl. And a big contributor to that team was the famous defensive end Dexter Manley. I know he was a multi-time, but a tough, hard-nosed defensive end. He wasn't just a finesse guy. He was a beast. And then towards the end of your time at the Cardinals, he was traded to the Cardinals, correct?
Yeah. I don't know if he was traded to us or he got cut by the Redskins, and then we picked him up on waivers because our head coach was Joe Bugle, he was the offensive line coach of the famous Hogs offensive line of the Redskins. He's the one that coined that term, call his offensive linemen the Hogs. So we picked him up, and Dexter Manley was an interesting guy. When we picked him up off waivers, the process is They'll pick him up in the morning, and then usually he flies in that evening, and then he comes to practice the next day. But we signed him that morning, and everybody read about it in the paper, and it was in the news. And then Joe Bugle came in, the head coach, and said, "Men, that evening, he said, tomorrow morning we're going to get a new player, Dexter Manley. He's an all-world talent, but I'm just going to warn you." He said, "Dexter's a little different," and he said, now he'll have a big scar. He said Dexter grew up in I think it's called the 4th Ward of Houston, which is like the really tough area of Houston. He said when Dexter was a young man, he got into a fight and somebody slashed him with a knife, and he's got a big scar that runs from the corner of his mouth all the way up to his ear. And then he stopped, and Joe Bugle said, "Please don't ask him how he got the scar." Now, the moment he said that, he's talking to a room full of 53 guys who everybody thinks he's a tough guy. Of course they're going to ask him about the scar. Somebody's going to ask him about the scar. And sure enough, Dexter Manley shows up the next day, and we're sitting at lunch, and somebody said, "Yo, Dexter, what's with the scar on your face, man?" Dexter, thankfully, just calmly replied, I got cut in a fight with a knife. What else you want to know?" Everybody just kind of quiet, but that was my memory of Dexter Manley. And he had a hard time. We learned this later. Dexter, I don't remember where he went to school, maybe somewhere in Houston, but he ended up in the NFL because of his, otherworldly talent. But we would learn later that Dexter, had a 3rd grade reading level. And to compensate for it, as many people do with anything that you don't do so well, you compensate somehow. Dexter he used to come to work every day. We're practicing during the week. We just come in, shorts and flip flops and tennis shoes, t-shirt to work because we're football players. But he would come in a suit. He came to work in a suit, and he carried a briefcase, and his briefcase always had a Wall Street Journal. And
just so he could look professional
he wanted
to the football team.
Yeah, he told his mother, who raised him, that he worked for, that he played football, and he wanted to feel and act like he was going to an office where he worked, and that's how he treated his football career, like it was business, which was kind of cool. But he would come and sit down, open up his briefcase, and he was taking out the Wall Street Journal. I don't think he read it. I think he just liked to open it and look around. But the Wall Street Journal, unlike some of the other papers, don't really have colored pictures in it. So just, a lot of text. And I think that's probably, and maybe because he was with the Redskins,
in D.C.
In D.C. He came with the Wall Street Journal and maybe the Washington Post, I don't remember. But it was just kind of one of those odd things that I observed during my football career. There's just a lot of crazy stuff that I saw playing in the NFL, all while you were a little boy.
Yeah,
you didn't know any of this because you were home with mom.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, let's talk about the reality was maybe one of the biggest reasons why the Cardinals never went to the playoffs during your 5 years is because they were right in the heart of the best teams in the NFL at the time. Again, 3 of your 5 years there, someone from your division, the NFC East, would win the Super Bowl. And then, the Giants, again, would win it in 86, your first year, and your last year with the Cardinals in 90. And then in 87, the Redskins would win it. But another team that we would eventually get to know the best, the Philadelphia Eagles, they would win the division your 3rd year with the Cardinals under, of course, the famous Buddy Ryan. I remember you told me a story. I don't know how early it was, but you were playing the Eagles when you were on the Cardinals, and the famous Andre Waters, the hard-hitting, crazy, safety that receivers and running backs feared. Didn't he do something, during warm-ups to kind of come and intimidate you guys? Yeah. And yeah.
I was with the Cardinals, and we had a new punter like every week. either the first or second year, and so they were just rotating punters in. And sometimes that happens with kickers or quarterbacks, or depending on the position. But we never found a really good punter. So this was another new guy. We're probably in the middle of the season, and we were playing in Busch Stadium, where our home games were. We shared with the baseball Cardinals.
Oh yeah.
And so you go out, you show up at the stadium in the morning, and you go out a couple of hours before the kickoff, and you go out as groups and warm up. So the running backs would go out together, the wide receivers go out together, defensive backs go out together. So, but every team does that. That's just the way that you go out as groups and you warm up together as a group. But I'm always the first group that went out because I went out and returned punts. So I go out and catch punts and kickoffs. So I'm the very first group that goes out. So I'm out there catching punts. And while I'm out there, I see the Eagles defensive backs come out. And they had really a lot of great players. Eric Allen, who just went into the Hall of Fame this year. And there's a guy named Roynell Young. It was Wes Hopkins was their all-pro safety from SMU.
Was Rich Miano there yet?
Rich Miano was not there yet. He was with the Jets. But their group comes out, and I'm standing on the 50. My punter's in the end zone, and he's punting to me, right? So we're on kind of like our sideline, and I see the defensive. But every group comes out and they jog around the field. So the Eagles defensive backs group are coming and they're jogging around the field. And they jog past me, and they're jogging towards the end zone as my punter's punting from the end zone, and I'm standing on the 50. And when the group of defensive backs get to the end zone, my punter, our snapper's there, snaps him the ball, and he steps up to punt. And just as he does, the Eagles defensive backs as a group are together right in front of him. And all of a sudden I see Andre Waters peel off and blocks the punt. And I was shocked because you don't do that. Warm-ups is kind of a sacred time. It's your time to warm up and do your thing.
And something like that would likely start a fight or something,
and
right?
It did. Well, there weren't a lot of guys that were out on the field yet. So there were just a handful of us Cardinals who were out on the field. And the Eagles defensive backs were the first group really that came out. And Andre blocks the punt, and then he jumps up in the punter's face, and he's yelling, "All day, baby. All day. I'm going to be in your face all day long." And all of a sudden, we had a couple of players that were there, and they jumped up, and they start, grabbing each other. And then next thing you know, coaches are jumping in, trying to pull players off. I'd never seen anything like that all my years playing high school, college, and pros. That somebody
even
would block
since in the years since.
You've never seen that. There weren't cameras the way they have cameras now.
Oh yeah, it would have been all over social media.
That would have been all over social media. It would have been all over ESPN, but it wasn't in those days. And but here's the funny thing is that later in the game, we went out to punt, and there was a little quiet. Busch Stadium held 55,000 people, but there were only about 25,000 people that came to watch our games because we were horrible. We went out there to punt, and it got kind of quiet when they snapped the ball, and you could hear Andre Waters yelling, "All day, baby, all day." And I think when our punter got the ball snapped to him, when he heard "all day, baby," I think he kind of fumbled around with the ball and juggled it a little bit, just enough that
he shanked the punt.
And shanked the punt. But somebody got a hand. It wasn't a complete block, but somebody got up there from the Eagles and got a hand on it.
But it was more just him missing it or bobbling it
too long
to where they got close.
Because he had heard from the Eagle sideline, "All day, baby."
And Andre Waters was in his head from when he actually blocked it.
Exactly. That was the genius of Andre Waters, is that he said something in the pregame that stayed in the punter's head and remained with him late in the game when they needed a block punt. He yells out "all day," and our punter kind of fumbles the ball, and they get a partial block, and it's a shank punt, and they get the ball in good field position, and I think they ended up beating us. So,
oh, that's awesome, man. Since you finished your career in Philly, and we stayed there since you were a broadcaster there. Andre Waters came to be your friend and teammate, but he's beloved in Philly, and so he's a legend to us. But yeah,
They call him his nickname. I think it was I think ironically it was a Cardinal lineman. Who is the Cardinal lineman, the Hall of Famer, number 72?
Dan Deerdorf.
Dan Deerdorf.
Yeah.
Dan Deerdorf, when he was broadcasting,
Yeah.
called, the nickname he gave me, Dan
Andre
Deerdorf,
Dirty Waters.
Dirty Waters. He called him Andre Dirty Waters because he
was an announcer by the time you were playing.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And he gave him that nickname.
Yeah, and they used to say in Philly that Andre played to the echo of the whistle.
Not when the whistle was blown, when it was still echoing. He was still playing.
He played to the echo of the whistle. I never heard that before, but that was said of Andre Waters. He played to the echo of the whistle. So the whistle's blown, and then there's a little trail off. That's when Andre sometimes did his best work. So you're standing around the pile or you're out of bounds, you had your head on a swivel with Andre Waters nearby.
I remember when you took me to Reggie White's funeral and we're eating afterwards with Eric Allen, and Eric Allen even told me a story when he was a rookie in '88, and he said, they're playing against the Redskins, who were the defending champions his rookie year in '88 because they won it in '87, and he's on the field playing defense, and he's in awe of the fact that Doug Williams is who he's playing against. He just won Super Bowl MVP, and at some point after a play, Andre Waters didn't even make the play, but Doug Williams tracked him down, and he said he just punched Andre in the stomach, just from a residual,
Something that happened.
Yeah, something that happened.
Another game.
Yeah, maybe a year ago.
before.
Yeah. I even remember when Eric Allen told me that story. Oh, it's crazy. And then I remember, didn't you say that, after Andre blocked that punt from your punter in the warmups, didn't Reggie White come either there to kind of break it up or whatever and apologize?
Yeah, it wasn't right then. It was when we had the coin toss.
Oh yeah.
The two teams, the captains came on the field and did the coin toss. And after I don't know who won or lost, but Reggie White was one of the captains. And then, you shake hands, they toss the coin, somebody wins, and you decide who's kicking, who's receiving. And after all that's done, the captains go back to their teams. Except Reggie White hung around and came towards our sideline. And he walked over to our sidelines, and Reggie had this deep voice, and everybody was kind of, our team was getting ready to go out and kick the ball or receive it. And Reggie White came over and he said, "Hey, listen, sorry about my teammate, Andre." And then he stops and he goes, "Y'all know Andre ain't right. He ain't right." And then he just turned around and walked back, and we all stood there and go, "Whoa." Reggie White came over to just tell us that, "I'm sorry about my teammate, but, y'all know Andre ain't right." That was kind of cool. That was the way Reggie was another really interesting teammate and a great, great man that I played with.
Oh, that's awesome. So again, let's talk about, so again, you were kind of in, right at the crossroads of, the best teams in the NFL during your 5 years on the Cardinals. And so we're talking about the New York Giants under Bill Parcells, who won the Super Bowl your rookie year. We're talking about the Washington Redskins under Joe Gibbs, who won the Super Bowl your second year. And then again, your fifth year on the Cardinals, the New York Giants would win the Super Bowl again under Bill Parcells. And, we won't talk too much about later on in your Eagles career when the Dallas Cowboys would win back-to-back Super Bowls your last 2 years on the Eagles under Jimmy Johnson. But you really got to have a front row seat to some of the greatest players and teams in NFL history, even to this day. So when we talk about, especially those three teams, the Dallas Cowboys under Jimmy Johnson, Washington Redskins under Joe Gibbs, and the New York Giants under Bill Parcells, they were all smash-mouth, hard-nosed, 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of teams. They ran the ball as much as they could. I've asked you this before. Give me your ranking, first, second, and third place. Who were the best offensive lines of that day between the New York Giants under Parcells, the Washington Redskins, the Hogs under Joe Gibbs, and the Dallas Cowboys under Jimmy Johnson? Start with third place and let's work down to first place.
Probably the third. I would say the Parcells offensive line. They were great. They had a great running game. They had a little running back, my size, a little bit heavier, more durable, named Joe Morris from Syracuse. Younger brother Jamie also played in the league. Little guy, maybe 5'7". I think he went to Michigan. But they had a huge offensive line. Bart Oates, my teammate at BYU, was a center for all those teams.
All those Giants teams.
All those Giants teams. And they were really, really good. Billy Ard was a guard. Can't remember all their names, but they were tough.
But they're third place in your mind of those three.
I think the Hogs, the years I got there, they were, I think, still shuffling players around. But the original Hogs from 82, 83, earlier, before I was still in college, were probably, it may have been better because they had John Riggins.
The running back.
Riggins was still playing in the NFL with the Redskins, but he was, starting to diminish. So I think they were probably number 2.
So even with Hall of Famers, guard Russ Grimm, tackle Joe Jacoby. I know center Jeff Bostic.
Jeff Bostic, yeah, his brother Joe was my teammate with the Cardinals.
And then in '91, you weren't with the Cardinals anymore, but the Redskins would win the Super Bowl again, and that time they would have guard Mark Schlereth, who everyone knows from his broadcasting career.
Yeah, and they had a tackle from Ohio State named Jim Lachey, who had been added, an all-pro guy. But I think, in my mind, there's no question that the best offensive line in the NFL was in Dallas. Mark Stepnoski was the center.
Even over the Hogs?
Yeah, I think so, because I think they were just younger, and, their tackles were Mark Tuine, my good friend, was at right tackle. Their left tackle was a guy named Eric
Williams. Maybe one of the best ever, would you say?
Just a great player. Who are their guards?
Their third and last Super Bowl they would win, they had Hall of Fame Larry Allen.
Yeah,
but
Larry
he wasn't
Allen
there for the first two.
No, he wasn't there when I was playing.
But even without him, you would still take them over the Hogs.
Yeah,
to be clear.
Nate Newton was.
He was dominant.
Was their left guard, and then their right guard, a guy named John Giesick.
Yeah,
sound familiar?
Yeah.
Gogan would come later.
Kevin Gogan.
State Kevin Gogan. They were huge, just enormous, and they Emmitt Smith ran behind that offensive line, and a lot of people think that they could have put anybody back there. I don't believe that. Emmitt Smith was a Hall of Fame player and most yards in NFL history, but that offensive line was enormous. I mean, enormous.
You feel like they were bigger size-wise than the Hogs?
I think so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Stepnoski wasn't that
He
big.
was more of,
he was like normal size.
But everyone
like
else.
280.
Yeah.
That's normal size. It's normal size. Everybody else was Newton was, 360.
Probably the biggest one, right?
He was huge. But yeah, I think that offensive line, and we used to say, that the NFC East they used to call it the Beast of the East. The Beast of the East was whichever team was winning the Super Bowl. It was either the Redskins or the Giants. The Cowboys were always, and Buddy Ryan had come to the Eagles in '86 and had the best defense of that era after the '85 Bears were the Eagles. The Eagles were just, they were scary.
They often get lost in the mix, not as much anymore, but they never quite won the Super Bowl, unlike those other teams. They weren't as well-rounded on offense in particular.
Had Buddy Ryan paid more attention to his offense, he just felt like we can win with our defense. So, and he used to tell the offense, we just need you to score a touchdown, one touchdown, because we'll score a touchdown. He'd tell the special teams, get us a field goal, the offense, you get a touchdown, and the defense we're gonna intercept the ball and score, and we're gonna intercept the ball or cause a fumble and score or put it on the plus 5 yard line. That's how Buddy Ryan's mentality was. Had he just given a little bit of attention to his offense, because he had a great quarterback. Randall Cunningham was a great quarterback. But they didn't have a great running game, and they had great receivers. Mike Quick was one of the best receivers of that era. But their offensive line was horrendous.
Do you feel like that's the main thing that fell short for the Eagles?
Yeah.
Under Buddy Ryan, with the O-line?
Yeah.
Including when you got there right after Buddy Ryan.
Yeah, and the O-line was still in a state of flux. But anyways, the NFC East, everybody knew. There's no question in that period that to win the Super Bowl, you had to go through the NFC East, and because you would get beat up. I mean, those teams, the Hogs. You had the Cowboys, that offensive line. You had the New York Giants, and then there was the Cardinals. But you'd be black and blue if you played in the NFC East in that time. I mean, it was smash mouth. You have memories coming to those games.
Yep.
As a kid, Mom would take you and
Yeah.
sat in the stands, and you're probably frightening for you as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, 8-year-old to sit in the stands and watch those games. Especially, well, later I think you were at Veteran Stadium as for the home games, but you didn't go on any road trips. But you sat with Mom in Lambeau Field and
Yeah.
Busch Stadium. You don't remember, but with the Cardinals in Arizona, so.
But yeah, with the Eagles, we often talk about those teams that won the Super Bowl, but yeah, the Eagles often get lost in the mix. But, oftentimes, like you said, they would actually dominate these teams in the division that would later on win the Super Bowl. The Giants, the Redskins, the Cowboys, both when you were there and when you were with the Cardinals, a lot of the times people thought the Eagles were better than, the Redskins and Giants and Dallas, who would eventually win the Super Bowls during those years.
The other interesting thing about that era is that they would take turns beating up on each other, those teams.
Yeah.
Because the Cowboys could never, ever beat the Eagles.
Yeah.
They had a hard time. I think it's like boxing. It's a
game of styles.
Style.
It's about countering your specific opponent.
And the Cowboys always had trouble with the Eagles. On the other hand, the Eagles could never beat the Redskins. They always had a hard time with Joe Gibbs' teams.
Yeah.
And then the Giants, the Giants had a hard time with the Eagles and the Redskins, but they could never beat the Cowboys. They never beat the Cowboys. They had a hard time with the Cowboys. So it was just the difference of styles and maybe personalities, and then offenses and defenses. But it was a fun, and it was a really interesting time to be in the NFL at that era, especially. And I'm really glad that I started my career and played so much of my career in the NFC East. I think the only year that I didn't play in the East was when we were in Green Bay, and I was, then it was called the NFC Central.
But even then, your 1 year with the Packers is the last year the Redskins won the Super Bowl. So, 91.
Oh, it was 91, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Your teammate Kirk Ovale was on that team.
That's right, yeah.
But, it's interesting. And, your last 4 years in the NFL, 90, 93, those famous 4 Super Bowls consecutively were the Buffalo Bills win every year and lost every year. But what most people forget to realize is that all 4 Super Bowls in a row that they lost were to the NFC East.
That's right.
The Beast from the East. The
Cowboys and the
Giants first, then the Redskins, and then the Cowboys for the last 2.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
So,
I never thought about that.
Yeah,
they lost all 4 of those Super Bowls to NFC East teams.
Yep.
And the East was it was not for the faint of heart. You had to be tough and strong and resilient, because you were going to get beat up if you played in the NFC East.
Well,
it changed over the years, of course. It's been 30 plus years, but I think we're coming back with the Eagles. The Eagles looking the way they are now.
I think they have problems, but the reality is everyone else has problems too. I think the Lions scare me the most right now.
Don't be scared, son.
But
dog, you're scared, get a dog. You scared? Come on, don't be scared. Is that why you got green in the back here? Because you're owed to the Eagles?
Always.
Nice touch.
Fly, Eagles, fly.
Nice.
And hopefully the Phillies don't lose game 3 tonight.
Yeah.
So, but thanks so much, Dad. We're going to wrap up our episode, but thanks so much. I want to thank my guest, my father, Vai Sikahema, for being a guest on this episode.
I hope this works out. This I think you're good at this.
Thanks,
I'm very
Dad.
impressed with the way you ask questions. Of course, your knowledge in the NFL is second to none. You're the most historian. You have more history in your brain there than most people. And you tell me stuff all the time that I didn't know. So I'm very impressive. Good job.
Thanks, Dad. We'll wrap it up, and one more thing. EAGLES!
Holy smokes, son.